Hello again. To start our market sessions, module market sessions, I just want to raise some numbers. 2 years ago, the watt peak for modules cost about 29 cents per watt peak. That is from the PV exchange price index for mainstream modules. 1 year ago, that decreased already to 15 cents, and this month it was at 10 cents. And that is mainstream modules, so you can find even much lower prices on the market. So we will discuss in this session, will this price decline has that made developers happy, and what is coming next? So some people say it's not sustainable, prices have to rise again, it will go up again. Others say they have never gone up in the past very much. That was then maybe more a side movement. So we have to see, is it worth stockpiling modules now? We will discuss that later this session. To add complexity, we'll also discuss what else to factor in. And I was a bit surprised that not only, let's say, governments are looking for supply chain diversification, but also those who procure modules. We will hear that later, but to get started, I want to welcome Edurne Zoco. She is Executive Director for Clean Energy Technologies at S&P Global, and she has prepared some great charts. And is she already here? Hi, Edurne. Good morning.
Can you hear me
well? Thank you very much.
Good morning to you as well.
Good morning. Thank you very much for joining. And I have the privilege that I have already seen your presentation. It's really great charts which you will show us. And go ahead.
Well, thank you, Michael, and the rest of PVMAC for having me here today. I think I only have around 10 minutes, so I'm going to go delve into the topic. My presentation has 2 sections. First, I'm going to talk a bit about what has been happening in the market, and then I'll talk a bit about what we are seeing in terms of forecast at S&P. Sorry, I don't think it seems to work. Oh, yes, sorry. I just need to be a bit more patient. Bear with me. Okay, so what has been happening in the market? This slide shows that modules, but also batteries, have been leading the price declines in the last 2 years. The left chart shows the blended global average for all regions and technologies for 2022 to 2024 period. And as you were saying in the presentation, Michael, we have seen prices dramatically declining from around 25 cents to like half of that price or even less in just 2 years. That's on the price side. However, as we all know, production costs have not declined so fast for manufacturers. The right chart shows the evolution for the batteries, and you know, it is not as steep as in the case of modules, but we also see significant price declines from around $250 per kilowatt hour to way below 200 on average for all technologies. So on the battery sector, we are also seeing very similar trends as we are seeing in solar, because we are seeing declines for modules, but also for inverters and trackers. But the main difference in the battery sector and the battery energy storage sector is that prices are driven by the dynamics of the automotive sector. So the storage is really a price taker, and the prices of batteries have evolved or have declined massively because of what has been happening in the auto or EV sector in the last 2 years. Okay. So why have we seen so dramatic declines in prices for modules and batteries? Well, oversupply is obviously the main reason. However, it's not the only one. We have seen significant material price declines like polysilicon, but also for glass and other module materials. We have seen increased efficiencies that have also helped to reduce cost. In the case of batteries, we have seen technology developments that have achieved a greater greater density, and all of this has also contributed to reduce costs and reduce prices. However, as you will see in this chart, oversupply is probably the biggest reason for this massive price decline. If you focus on the left side of the chart, the first column shows the module global capacity in 2024. And the second column, in the purple one, is our installation forecast for this year. You will see very clearly that there is an oversupply or ratio of 2 to 1 between capacity and installation forecast. And it's not only that there is massive oversupply, is that also if you look at the current capacity capacity manufacturing in China, it is already larger than our estimation for installations in globally in 2024. If you now focus on the right side of the picture, you will see there is a very similar situation for batteries. We see a much bigger capacity for battery cells than our current expectation for demand for both storage and EV sectors, and in the same situation than for solar modules. The fact that capacity in China is already enough to serve global demand. So, of course, this rapid or dramatic decline across the module supply chain has had significant impact on companies' financial situation and financial statements. This chart shows a comparison of gross margins across the module supply chain between 2022 and 2024, estimated, because we don't have the final yet. If we focus on 2023, you will see that despite major polysilicon price declines already happening in the second half of 2023, polysilicon players still had very strong margins, over 40% in 2023. This is, of course, for average industry. And the margins for wafer companies were still quite good, and then lower for cells and modules. Why they were already lower for cell and module nodes? Because the cell and module sectors or nodes were the first part of the supply chain that had to react to the market price contraction, while we start seeing declines in module prices, but still the cost structures of manufacturers were quite high, and this, of course, created some challenges and some pressure at the margin level. 2024, it is not a great picture, but it's not a surprise if you have been following earnings calls. It's been a very challenging year for manufacturers, and yeah. So of course, there are exceptions. There are manufacturers with better margins, but overall, it is quite a challenging picture in terms of margins for the industry this year. And then I think you were asking at the beginning. You were saying at the beginning, how relevant is this for developers? How relevant are module price declines to support further deployment or installation of solar? Modules are becoming less and less important in terms of making whether or not a project is going to happen, or whether a project is going to be profitable in Europe and in other regions. And the reason is because the total weight of module costs within the PV system, CapEx, has dropped massively in the last 18 months. And which means that any additional declines in module prices will have a much smaller impact on reducing the overall PV system CapEx. Our expectation or our forecast is between 2022 and 2025, module decline will be over 50%. However, system CapEx will not decline more than 25%. And this is because despite significant declines on the hard cost part of PV system CapEx, like inverters, modules, and the rest of of components, we see still a significant cost and increases in other parts of like soft costs, like installation costs, land, and labor. So modules are becoming less and less important, and this trend will continue to 2030. And the reality is that what is limiting solar development at this moment in Europe, or the biggest factor, has nothing to do with cost, but the rapid increase of negative hours, negative prices, or very low prices for many hours. We have seen a major increase of negative hours in 2024, and we expect this trend to grow significantly from now to 2030. So this is what is really going to be limiting the expansion of solar in Europe, not so much cost from modules or other materials. So until now, I've been talking about what has been happening. Now, what is ahead, and of course, we can debate afterwards in the panel whether or not panelists agree with our views for 2025. But at S&P Global, our view is that module price must stabilize in 2020, 2025, and of course, when I say stabilizing, I mean from actual contract prices. We are not talking about some of the current spot prices we are seeing right now, in Europe, with very low prices as a consequence of like PERC inventory clearance and pressure from some of the distributors, etc. So why we expect prices to stop declining and stabilizing? The reason is because we are seeing several factors in the industry that make us to think the prices have reached a bottom. First, as I've been talking in the previous slide, module prices have declined much faster than cost, and of course, this makes the industry not sustainable in terms of in financial terms. So this cannot continue much longer for many players. But second, and most importantly, we are seeing some significant movements or announcements in China that help us to make this call. And the first is that we are having seen minimum price guidance for the new tenders in China around 68 RMB. Basically, with projects not being accepted or being rejected if they had lower prices than that and being disqualified. So this is an indication that the industry is changing. The other two factors that we are seeing that is significant factors that are happening in China is that we have seen a push for rationalization of capacity since the first half of the year, with some of the announced capacity expansions being delayed or cancelled. But also in the last month, we have seen a quite significant development, which is that the government has cut the tax rebates that support exporting modules to international markets, and our expectation is that this cut tax could be further reduced, as we have seen also this phenomenon happening in other industries, in China. So this is an important development and something to definitely watch out. And of course, all of this is going to favor additional concentration of the supply chain across all nodes. The supply chain is already quite concentrated, but this is going to be, even more strongly concentrated with fewer players. And then another reason why things have reached bottom is that in the last month there has been increasing concerns among the industry stakeholders regarding potential quality issues that come from very strong pressure from manufacturers to reduce costs. So all of these kind of sets the tone for what the limits are. And as I was saying, modules are less important in terms of making the final decision of whether or not a project is feasible. So, it is kind of pointless to continue reducing hard costs to that extent. And then I'd like to conclude, talking about, when I said that the prices are going to be flat, that doesn't necessarily mean they are going to be the same for all regions. In 2025, we expect regional variations to continue. So this chart actually presents on data from our new service at S&P Global. Since July 1st, we have launched the first daily module price assessments in the industry, and they include daily regional price codes for China, Europe, and the United States. And this chart actually shows the evolution since the opening or since the launch of that daily prices. So as you can see, there is regional variation, very strong between the United States and the global price or the China price, with Europe until now has been developing quite aligned with global prices, because these are FOB versus DDP prices in Europe. However, for 2025, we'll have to see if that continues, or there are some segments within the European market that, as a consequence of policy, as a consequence of non-price criteria in public tenders, have actually the room to have higher prices within the market. And with all of this, I'd like to say thank you, and looking forward to the discussion with the rest of the panelists.
Yeah, thank you very much, Edurne. This was Edurne Zoco, Executive Director of Clean Energy Technologies at S&P Global. And we will see you again in a few minutes on the panel. And before we come to the panel, I want to welcome Jonathan Gifford. I think, Jonathan, come in. You can come in. Hi, Jonathan. Hi. I think most of you know you because you have been for many years editor-in-chief at PV Magazine. Now you are editor-at-large, but I'm happy that you are still here. And we kicked off the roundtables, I think, something like 9 or 10 years ago, depends what you count. And
it is something like that. A lot of roundtables, and all over the world. Started in Munich and went all over the world. So great to be here. Okay, almost as long as, or even longer than the roundtables, we are discussing manufacturing in Europe. That 10 years ago, that was when the European industry had been just declined. You have had a look to India and the US because there are also efforts of the government to increase local manufacturing. And before we go to the panel and also have an eye on European manufacturing, we want to hear from you what you have seen in India and the US. Well, perfect. Thank you very much, Michael. We'll try and get the presentation up as quick as we can. Sorry, I'll go back to the first slide. We are talking supply chains in this session. A great session from Michael. Credit to the whole team. And it is really interesting, as we heard from Edurne from S&P Global, there has been a period of rapid price declines right throughout the globe in terms of PV module prices over the past 12 to 18 months. But another thing we have been seeing is a diversity of manufacturing to some extent. Now, to what extent? This is a first chart from Bloomberg NEF that looks right across the clean tech supply chain. Right at the top there, you can see wind, then it goes down to metal refining, then to lithium-ion batteries. And at the bottom 5 bars there are PV. We can see that polysilicon, there is some geographical diversity, wafer and ingot less so, even less again when it comes to ingots. Cell is highly concentrated. Sorry, the red is manufacturing in China, so that can show you the more red there is, the more of it that is in China. Cell is quite concentrated. And then module at the bottom, which shows there is a little bit of diversity there, about 20 to 25%. Polysilicon and module is where the geographical diversity exists. Moving on, why is there geographical diversity? Well, policy is a key factor. This is also from Bloomberg NEF, and this shows the kind of policies that governments are employing to support local manufacturing. We have local content provisions in purple, tariff duties in blue, local manufacturing subsidies in red, although no country has that just on its own. And then countries with 3 or more of these policies, we can see that in pink, and then
with two of those policies. So that's in yellow. So there we have Brazil, and we've seen an expansion of manufacturing there. But then with three of those different types of support policies, we have India, and we have the United States, and that's very much the focus of this presentation. Let's first turn to India. The data here is from AIFA and JMK Research. These are the major Indian manufacturers, and interestingly, this shows the manufacturing capacity, which is in yellow, the production, the actual production, which is in green, and then the percentage of that production that is exported, which are the blue dots. We can see three manufacturers in particular had the lion's share of exports in terms of module exports for Indian manufacturers. And then we can see the pie chart. Well, it's not really much of a pie because 98% of those modules exported from India were exported to the United States. The figure is a 23-time increase of module exports from India from 2022 to 2023, which is really a remarkable result. When you look at the further internationalization of manufacturing, two of the leading manufacturers there, Waaree and Vikram Solar, have both announced 5 and 4 gigawatt cell and module integrated facilities to be established in the United States. So they're actually establishing manufacturing in their biggest export market. Of course, the Indian market has some protectionist policies in place. It has the approved list of models and manufacturers, which the implementation of that was delayed by some time, but it is in place now, providing some domestic market protection for Indian manufacturers. But it is also, and then also public tenders, about 8 gigawatts a year of public tenders are reserved for domestic content requirement cells and modules. But even though there are these protections in place, we can see that Indian production, as it's forecast, again from JMK Research and AIFA, this data, we can see that the production in India is predicted or forecast to fall short of the domestic requirements. 30 gigawatts of production or of installations in India is forecast for 2025, growing to 35 gigawatts in 2026. And because of this increase in module exports, primarily to the US, India is actually going to fall short of supplying its own domestic market with modules. An interesting development. If we now turn to the United States, these figures are from S&P Global. Thank you, Edurne, and your excellent team. We can see that the US market has made considerable progress in terms of establishing the solar supply chain. The dark blue is operational capacity. The blue is what is under construction. Huge increase in areas like cells and modules we can see there. And then announced is the light blue in terms of cells, wafers, and ingots. It's nearly all announced capacity that we can see in the US. But interestingly, we can see that US production installations, which is around about 40, 42, 43 gigawatts forecast for next year, will be met by domestic production, in particular when it comes to polysilicon and modules. Now, production in the US has been supported by duties, by tariffs, countervailing duties, anti-dumping duties, the Uyghur Protection Act, but also, which are also under review in terms of modules from Southeast Asia. So it will be interesting to see how that plays out early next year and what impact that will have. But the primary boost has been in the form of the Inflation Reduction Act. I won't get into great details about how that functions, but it provides both a capex subsidy, the investment tax credit, a production tax credit, and then also some adders in terms of US policy, in terms of support for domestic production. How that's going to look like under a Trump administration, there are many questions at the moment, and it's a big topic for debate. And when we look at the leading producers, we can see, actually, interestingly, I've been talking about crystalline silicon manufacturing, polysilicon, ingots, wafers, cells, modules, but the leading US manufacturer, of course, is First Solar, which is a thin film technology, a cadmium telluride technology, and that's been expanding extremely rapidly in recent years on the back of these protectionist policies and then the bonus under the Inflation Reduction Act. We can also see that a number of manufacturers are brand new. The light blue bars, these are net capacity additions. So there's new capacity that's being added when they had no capacity to start with. So looking forward, and then Edurne had a very similar chart to this. This is also from S&P Global about international prices. Protectionism does have consequences when it comes to end market prices, and we can see prices in the US 25 up to 35 cents per watt peak, very different to what you see in China, which is below 10 cents per watt peak. Europe slightly above, although some of the reports that we've been getting is that pricing is now down below 10 cents per watt peak for some tenders, given this oversupply environment that Edurne was talking about. Questions to consider: what will the IRA look like under the Trump administration? One of these policy adders, these bonuses, it looks unlikely that they will be maintained. Maybe the ITC and the PTC, the duration of which will be reduced, if not completely scrapped. Also, it is the question begs: how big would the US market be if module prices weren't 25 to 35 cents? And can the European market sustain higher prices than 10 cents per watt, and therefore have a future for European manufacturers? And what role can India play in supplying markets outside of the US in the future? So, Michael, that is some details, some questions to put to your panel, and some information about two of the leading non-Chinese manufacturing markets, India and the United States.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jonathan. So I take away, you can maybe build up local manufacturing, but it has a price.
Indeed,
and we have to see. Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Yes, now we want to move to our panel discussions, where we catch also the perspective of other players in the industry on the topics raised before by Jonathan and by Edurne. Edurne is also back on the panel here. Welcome again, Edurne. And I want also to welcome, we are now going back in the value chain. So we started the module, and I want to welcome Monika Leiner. She is category manager, modules, solar modules at Goldbeck Solar. This is a leading German EPC company, and she oversees module procurement. Hello, Monika.
Hi, good morning, Michael. Good morning, everybody.
I also want to welcome Hendrik Göthel. He is VP Technology at Enpal. He has a sort of a double role today in this discussion, because Enpal is one of the biggest residential solar installation startups in Germany, and so he is also procuring modules, but Enpal is also considering to establish solar manufacturing in Europe, at least when the politics will allow for it. Hello, Hendrik.
Thanks for having me. Hi.
And I want to welcome Michele Porri. He is head of business development and marketing at 3Sun. This is a subsidiary of the Italian energy company Enel. And 3Sun is already ramping up manufacturing in Europe, so they are already producing, and next year they want to scale to 300 gigawatts. We will hear more about that later. Hello, Michele.
Ciao, good morning to everyone.
Good morning. Monika, you are responsible for module procurement at Goldbeck. I mean, we have just seen how the module prices have been falling. Are you just happy that you can build for such low costs?
Well, Michael, this is a sword with two sharp edges. I mean, in general, as a company that strives for implementing renewable energy resources, we are, of course, happy that power from PV power plants is becoming cheaper and cheaper, and is one of the least cost resources now for electricity. So this is a great thing, no question. However, as an EPC company and working in a market that is very, very transparent, these profits coming from cheaper modules don't stay with us. So prices for turnkey installations came down almost in the same pace as module prices came down. And that has a significant impact on our business. I mean, we are providing excellent engineering. We are providing highest quality construction. Now, we have to really make sure that this excellence comes with a cost. And in order to maintain our services and the skilled engineers and all the stuff we have, we of course have to almost double the amount of installations we are completing every year in order to maintain this excellence of doing business. So we have to look at it from certain angles, and of course, as the situation is, we deal with that with providing highest quality and increasing the efficiency in the work we do. That
short
is a
answer
task,
to follow-up question, because now you can make a decision. I mean, we have seen the price development. Do you now stockpile modules, or do you think next year you will buy for the same conditions?
Well, we are pushing our customers, developers, investors to really sign the contracts and get going. Of course, there are restrictions in the market, be it grid connection, be it interest rates, or be it the whole business plan that slows things down a little bit at the moment, but we are not stockpiling modules. We try to attract our customers and say, okay, get going, sign now, even for projects that get built towards the end of next year, to secure the prices now. Because we are pretty confident that prices will increase in Q1. The extent not yet known, but there are hints that this will happen.
Yeah. Hendrik, you are in a similar position. How do you deal with the actual situation?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we are active in the residential segment, right? So I agree, and we've seen the chart Edurne has shown, and I agree with the current situation not being sustainable. So we do expect also there will be let's say, a normalization of prices coming up towards us. For us, since you said we have this hybrid role, I think we have a very good transparency on the production side, where our quality assurance team sits on site, but we also, of course, have a very good view on the demand. And as I said, especially in the residential sector, it's even more important also to be up to speed with product innovations. And while it is usually incremental innovation at this stage, you still have continuous improvement on the module side. And we, as Enpal, we do not want to offer inferior products. So that's also why for us it cannot be a strategy to now say, okay, we now for the next 6 months of demand we stockpile modules. Because then you might be in a situation where you cannot offer the latest product to the customers.
Because technology change is so rapid.
Exactly. As I said, it's not a step change. Usually it's an incremental change, but still, in a tough market, you want to have a competitive product.
Michaela, I mean, that also, I think this price decline came in a time when you were just planning and building your fab. So how do you deal with this price decline?
Let me put it in a different words. I mean, I've seen from Edurne that, strong oversupply, very low cost of PV, but this means low cost of energy for the system, okay? Plus the change of technology. This is, I think, the perfect moment to bring back to Europe some manufacturing of PV, because for the system, it's the lowest cost moment. So putting this together with the change of technology that it's happening, in particular Trisan is pushing on heterojunction technology, and in the future will go on tandem in order to reach high level of efficiency, with a strong support from EU institution and EU governments. I think it's the right moment to support and reach the target that Europe has set up of having 40% of local manufacturing compared to the installation per year. So what I see in all this, that such low cost of system could be an opportunity for Europe to reconquer a role within the PV manufacturing industry.
Edurne, I mean, you have shown how small the margins are, or even negative this year for a lot of manufacturers across the value chain. And you also said that that has to change in some way. Do you think that is possible by just technology, progress in technology, or do the prices have to go up?
I mean, that's a very, very interesting question. Our views is that it would be very challenging for prices to increase. This has only happened in the market in maybe 2-3 occasions in the last 20 years, and it was because of a very sudden large imbalance between supply and demand short-lived, just because there was maybe a very big deadline for installations in China, I remember a few years ago, or because of COVID. So those have been the only occasions where we have seen a surge of prices in short-lived. So our views is that there is not, in terms of global prices, there is no really a chance for prices to increase. However, we think that if prices stabilize, this will give some air to manufacturers to continue working around increasing efficiencies and economies of scale and trying to improve their margins. Having said that, the situation is very different for certain regions. As it has been shown before by Jonathan, we have very different regions with different legislation and policies. For instance, in the US, because of the recent developments that we have seen in terms of the anti-dumping and countervailing duties, the preliminary tariffs that were announced on Friday, we think this could be an opportunity for prices to increase in that market in particular, because of suddenly the pool of modules available is going to be smaller, right? But in terms of general trends and global prices, we don't think that's a possibility.
Monica, I think Jonathan has also raised these questions in his food for thought. Can the European market sustain higher module prices? You said that these low module prices don't only make you happy because you don't earn on it. But on the other, I think that is true for tendered markets, because in tenders you just have to be competitive to other developers. But if we look on the non-tendered market, so the unsubsidized market, PPA market, which, for example, in Germany this year was something about 30% of the large-scale solar market, then it should play a role, because you have to sell the electricity. And just to give an impression, in Central Europe, with the irradiation in Central Europe, 10 cents more capex per watt peak means 1 cent more per kilowatt hour that you have to sell your electricity. So what do you think? Can we sustain higher prices?
I would say yes. In general, higher prices would be possible, but I have to say also, as long as nothing cheaper is available. The market is very, very price driven. Give it all the discussions we had in the past, and very important discussions about ESG, enhancing on quality. In the end, it is the price that counts. And saying that if there is nothing else available, if we really would focus on highest quality available and really true ESG standards, and would kind of deploy them to all players on the European market, I think it would definitely be possible to increase prices. We've seen that in the United States. The market in the United States did not break down when the tariffs were imposed. The market is growing. We have seen that. And the market is attracting manufacturing capacities. So in the end, one would say, looking at it on a very high level, that was a good thing. And I think in Europe, we could do the same, and the market could take the same. However, in the current situation, as soon as something cheaper is available, the market will definitely turn to the cheapest solution.
But then you would have to sell a PPA for 8 cents per kilowatt hour than for 6 cents per kilowatt hour, or something like that.
I do see room for that.
Okay.
I do see room for that, definitely.
You mentioned, when we had the preparation call, you mentioned also something about the supply chain diversification. Which role does that play for you?
Well, of course, we have been looking into alternatives to Chinese manufacturers. But as it was shown in Jonathan's presentation, resources are limited there. And the US market is taking away these capacities beside the the demand in India or the United States itself. So there's hardly anything available for European off-takers like us. And if so, it comes with a higher price, which of course decreases your competitiveness here. We are looking into diversifying our supply chain. We are looking into all opportunities. We're retesting thin film solutions again. But as I said, the market is highly competitive, and as soon as there is no legislation that supports either ESG quality or non-Chinese product and helps us here to increase the prices, it is pretty difficult.
Hendrik, what about you? What non-price criteria, in particular the supply chain diversification, is important for you?
Yeah. So, as mentioned, top of our mind is, of course, to have a diversified portfolio. So, it is also known we've set up a mostly segregated supply chain in Vietnam, which is a second source for us right now, besides all the major players, of course. If we think about non-price criteria, also as Monica mentioned, of course, you have quality and warranty. Where you cannot make any compromises. Yeah, so you have to be on top of this, and this is also something Edurne showed this on the last slide of her presentation, that there's also fear of decreasing prices from Chinese suppliers, resulting in poorer quality. And I agree with this. Yeah, so we invest heavily into having our own teams on site, which are of course costs that you could possibly save when you have a more localized supply chain, because it's simply easier to get the transparency and adhere to quality standards. So there is also some offsets, I believe, that we could leverage. Of course, ESG, social standards and environmental standards need to be followed, and we monitor that closely. But as said, especially the diversification, even being able to have another source, not being 100% reliant on one source, is very important to us, and I think to the market in general.
Edurne, we have a short answer to a question. We have to have an eye on the time, unfortunately. How realistic do you think?
I will be short.
How realistic is it in your eyes to get a supply chain diversification away from China at the moment, let's see, for developers?
I mean, I agree with previous comment that it's very difficult. I mean, actually, it depends of what you mean by independence, right? If you are talking about increasing manufacturing capacity for modules in other regions, that's the easy part, right? Because it has a lower capex investment, it's quick, and it's the easiest part to reshore in other regions. However, you look to the entire module supply chain, and let's look at the US, right, as an example, because this is a market that has been actively supported or is trying to actively support local manufacturing with subsidies. Then there are trade barriers, as well as a local adder for. So there is an incentive to procure a US manufactured product with a 10% extra. On the bonification. However, even in this market, we are seeing that there has been significant announcements and a lot of capacity at the module level. But if you really look and Jonathan was showing some data from us before. You look at the cell level, at the wafer level, there is really no possibility. I mean, there is very limited capacity existing right now in the United States. So having more module capacity make it more independent, more resilient. I'm not really sure that's a yes. And then also you have to take into account other parts of the supply chain.
I think that is the point where we want to bring back, or I want to bring back Michele into this discussion, because you started module production, you will ramp up also the cell production next year, and you have some ideas how much it would cost to build up an alternative supply chain. How much is it?
Well, I mean, as Monica said, quality and ESG is not sufficient to be competitive. I mean, we are far away from the cost of the Chinese selling price as of today. No, the 10 cents that was mentioned before, we need at least 12, 14 cents more than that because of labor costs, because of energy costs, because all the costs that are around in a European framework manufacturing. So there is no way that any European industry can grow without a strong, let me say, regulatory and framework support to those manufacturers. So we need NZIA, we need non-price mechanisms. We need to make sure that Europe has a political intention to create this manufacturing. And then there is a big possibility. As I said before, this is the right moment. It's a moment of change of technology. It's a moment where Chinese have stopped investment because of the overcapacity. So we should push on that.
I would like you to point out one thing, because I mean, at the moment we have a bit the impression that in Europe, particularly if you look to India and the US, is not happening so much. But you mentioned the keyword NZIA, so National Net Zero Industry Act, which has passed in March, the EU legislation. So I think we are still waiting for the next part of NZIA. There's some sort of NZIA regulation where the consulting process should start soon. When do you think that this NZIA will have some effect? Will it have some effect?
Absolutely, it will. It's clearly based on the single government intentions. We are discussing with the Italian government. I think there is a strong intention to make it come out with the non-price criteria. That means we want to keep a competitive environment, but I think we need to add some kind of 30% related to non-price mechanisms. In that way, we can support ESG, we can support technology improvement, we can support research and development, and therefore support the growth of European industry. So I think keeping competitive in mind, we need to also always keep competitive mechanism, but introduce a 30% which should not be related only to price, but to local content, or at least research and development.
Yeah, I mean, I think
we can reach the target.
I have to shorten a bit because we have only 2.5 minutes left. I think NZIA defines some steps in the value chain. That's a discussion about now, how you calculate and weight these steps in order to define something as local. Hendrik, I want to come back to you because 3Sun is building up manufacturing in Europe with European equipment. You are looking for some other business models. Can you point out really shortly in what you are planning or what you are considering?
So first, I of course have to say I really respect and like what Enel and 3Sun are doing. We were thinking about joint ventures with Chinese partners, essentially bringing the two worlds together. The Chinese players we know are very good at scaling, very good at manufacturing. In Germany, we still have great technology and innovation with the Fraunhofer and other institutes. And we are thinking about pairing those two, essentially reversing what has happened in the past 20 years and bringing those two worlds together.
And what do you need for that? You are not starting at the moment because you also are waiting for some political support, I think.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things to consider, but most importantly, since you asked me to be on point, I think CapEx and OpEx subventions, especially on the energy side, especially for the first steps in the value chain, poly and ingot. And there needs to be a sort of a push start to get the industry to, in forms of OpEx and CapEx subsidies, to get the industry to a self-standing or self-sufficient mode.
Monica, also very short last answer. Are you having an eye on the NZIA discussion?
Yes, we do definitely. However, I have to say we have to keep in mind that Europe as a manufacturing location, we have kind of lost track when it comes to technology. As previous speakers already said, so much has happened in China when it comes to scaling up, economy of scale, technology development. It would take a lot of time and know-how and skills to take this back to Europe. So as much as we support and want to have production in Europe again, we have to make sure we do that in a very, very smart way in order not to kill the competitiveness of PV power in Europe and to stay a vibrant and profitable and developing setup among all players in the value chain here.
Edurne, now just a yes and no or no answer. Do you think that in 2030 we will see 30 or 40 gigawatt in European, not only module, but maybe also cell production, which is the goal of NZIA?
I think it's going to be very challenging.
Okay, that is a good closing remark because we have to move on. I take with me that even if you build solar, you are not always looking on the lowest prices. And by the way, at 2 o'clock this afternoon, we will discuss energy markets, and there we might discuss also whether it's possible to pay a bit more for PPA. Supply chain diversification is something many people are looking for, and EU is slow, but maybe there will be happening something later in 2025. Back to Frederike. Thank you very much to all the panelists.
Thank you, Michael. We have a short break coming up and we'll be back by 11 a.m. So feel free to check out our partners' booth that I mentioned earlier. You may even run into some of their representatives. After the break, we will kick off session 3, Leading Edge, What Next for Solar Cells. Our resident module and cell expert, Mark Hutchins, magazine director by day, has invited experts from module manufacturers Tongwei, Jinko Solar, Trina Solar and Longi, as well as speakers from CRU and the University of Oxford. They'll of course touch upon perovskite silicon, but also the more established module technologies. In search of higher efficiency, what can we expect? Find out right after the break.